welcome to another edition of Spooky Reads. So today I'm going to talk about Tales from the Crypt. So when I was a kid, I used to get my comics secondhand at a used bookstore in the town where I grew up. It was called Tom's Book Nook, and there was just kind of a box on the floor in the corner where he had random comic books that had been turned in by, I guess, other kids or maybe adults. I don't know where they came from, but there was a box over there and all the comic books in it were a dime. So I got $1 and I could buy 10 of them, and my mother did a very poor job supervising what I picked. So I got things that she probably expected me to get, like Archie and Josie and the Pussycats, Spider-Man, and I also got things like Red Sonja and things like Tales from the Crypt. And I pretty early on developed a taste for those horror comics. There were a bunch of them, and I was a kid, so I don't really remember for sure which titles I read when I was a kid, but they all had kind of adjectives for titles, like things like creepy, eerie, weird, and that would be like the biggest word in scary font on the cover. I really loved all of these. I think I loved that Twilight Zone kind of feel that a lot of them had. A lot of them, there was a range of what kind of story, right? Sometimes there were monsters and witches and ghosts and aliens, and sometimes it was just people being evil to one another. And they might be kind of detective stories, or they might be adventure stories. They really varied, but something creepy happened in every one of them. And like Twilight Zone and a lot of other science fiction fantasy that I was liking when I was around that age, they tended towards moralistic, like, people getting their comeuppance, people getting a justifiable punishment. It's like that guy in the zombie movie who gets eaten and you're happy that he got eaten. You feel bad for all the other people, but that one deserved it. And a lot of these stories were those kind. So some years ago, Tales from the Crypt became available as trades, and I bought all of them I could get my hands on. I don't think I have the whole set, but I have a bunch of them. And I have oh dear, did my bookmark fall out? I had a story picked to share with you guys. Let me find it real quick. Here it is. The story I picked is called The Proposal. So I'm not sure how well this will read aloud since it's a comic, but I'll do the best I can for you. Most of these had a storyteller, right? There's some creepy person who tells the story, like the Crypt Keeper, this old hag-looking witch. There's somebody who kind of introduces the story and binds them together for you for the anthology. Because even in just the comics, it was usually 2 or 3 very short stories in one comic book. So this one says, here's a terror tale of a chick who finally wormed the proposal. Pearl had always liked living in the best of style, with fine clothes, jewelry, a Park Avenue apartment, and a chauffeured Cadillac. And Pearl had always managed to find rich husbands who would be willing to keep her in the style to which she'd become accustomed, like Freddie Howell, for instance. Freddie Howell was Pearl's latest rich husband bankroll. He was, that is, until he announced, "We're through, Pearl. I'm going back to my wife." And she's sitting there with her powder puff in her hand. See? Yeah, being all glamorous. Gasp! Why, you cheap, no good. And he's gone. Now, Freddie was gone. Pearl had lost another bill-paying husband, and the wolf was at the penthouse door. Pearl was desperate. A dozen desperate plans were formulated in her pretty red head and discarded before she remembered the quiet, lonely man across the hall. Of course, he must have money, or he couldn't afford to live in this glorified cave. He'll be a pushover for little Pearl. She wrapped her flimsy black negligee around her shapely figure and stepped boldly into the hall as Howard Ellis locked his apartment door behind him and turned to the elevator. I beg your pardon, but do you have the time? My watch seems to have stopped. And he looks at his watch and he's looking very like, and he says, it's 9:30. Pearl let Howard stare. She let his eyes travel over her full young body just long enough. Then she put on the shy embarrassment act. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Why, we're neighbors, and I don't even know your name. I'm Pearl Drake, Miss Pearl Drake. Ellis, Howard Ellis. Well, here's the elevator. Pearl inwardly cursed the high-speed conveyance that had rushed upward through the steel throat of the building and interrupted her progress. She turned and glided back to her apartment as the elevator doors closed. Good morning, Mr. Ellis, and thank you for your time. Not at all, Miss Drake. She closed the door, leaned back distractedly against it, and frowned. I wonder if I overplayed my hand walking out like this. I wouldn't want him to think I'm a cheap female wolf on the prowl. He looks so proper and prudish. I wouldn't stand a chance if he thought that. Then Pearl grinned. She walked slowly across the living room, her voluptuous figure swaying sensuously. But he is a man. He's got all the instincts of a man. I bet he can't get me off his mind. She stopped at the desk, her mind racing, scheming, planning her next move. She fingered the dispossessed notice she'd received in the morning mail. They've given me a week to fork over $300 rent, or out on the street I go, and I haven't got it. I haven't got half that much. Pearl pondered her problem another moment, and then, with her lovely face assuming a determined air, she hurried into the bedroom to dress. Mr. Howard Ellis is my only out. I've got to get him, one way or another. The elevator operator eyed her up and down and grinned lasciviously when she asked him the information she needed. It was obvious he'd heard of her plight. I'd like to find out what Mr. Ellis does for a living, what firm he works for. Why don't you find out what I can do instead, honey? Pearl knew when to act haughty and indignant, and under other circumstances the elevator operator might have aroused her interest. But now, why, you fresh! Smack. She stood proud and triumphant as he rubbed his beet-red cheek where she'd slapped it. Then she coldly repeated, I asked you if you knew Mr. Ellis's business. He's a stockbroker. I think he has his own firm. Pearl crossed the lobby into the phone booth and scanned the city directory. Ellis. Ah, here it is. Howard Ellis and Associates, Inc. Stockbrokers, investment counselors, 231 Wall Street. Outside the luxurious apartment, Pearl contemplated hailing a cab, then considered her waning finances and walked up the side street to the subway. She rode uncomfortably in the crowded, roaring chasm, her dainty nose twitching scornfully at the suffocating scent of humanity surrounding her. She tried to lose herself in her plan of strategy. I'll wait for him outside the building at lunch hour. Of course, it'll be an accidental meeting. At noon, Pearl was at the entrance to 231 Wall Street, her campaign for the conquest of the unsuspecting Mr. Ellis crystal clear in her mind. I'll con him into taking me to lunch, and he'll see I'm no cheap dame. He'll see I've got high-class taste. Oh, here he comes, and here I go. And she runs into him, just kind of, literally runs into him, right? I beg your pardon, ma'am. I didn't see. Oh, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. Why, it's Mr. Ellis. Mr. Ellis, this is a coincidence running into you like this. But you don't recognize me in my clothes, do you? I mean, these clothes. Remember this morning, Pearl Drake, the penthouse apartment across the hall? Oh, yes, Miss Drake, and the stopped watch. So we see her take him for, take him to lunch, and then she's disappointed because he doesn't fall for it right away. And then he calls her and invites her to dinner. And then finally, after dinner, he seems to be making a move. So, soon they were back outside her apartment. Pearl leaned against her door, fingering Howard's coat lapel gently drawing him against her quivering body, whispering, Kiss me, Howie. Pearl. She kissed him with the most ravishing, hungry lips. She kissed him as she knew he'd never been kissed before. And then she left him standing there, limp, trembling. Gasping for breath, she locked the door between them and stood in the darkness of her apartment, grinning with satisfaction. One more like that and he'll be begging, and it better be soon. I've only got a few days left before I get kicked out. It was warm the next evening. There was no moon, and the sky hung dark overhead. Pearl could sense the deep tension in Howard as they walked home. She waited patiently. Finally, he stopped beneath a lamppost, and she saw a new, eager, determined look in his eyes. Pearl, I, I need you. I want you. Oh, Howard, if you only knew how much I need you. She watched this wealthy milquetoast pull himself together manfully. She listened, shocked, to the words he carefully announced in a firm, almost formal manner. Pearl, I want you for my wife. What? This was beyond Pearl's wildest dreams. Had she heard right? Was this a proposal? Now it was Pearl who was nervous. This character was playing for keeps. Not for a month, a year, forever. She had to ask him again. Howard, are you sure? You don't know me. I know you well enough to want you for my wife, Pearl. So he takes her upstairs, and they're going into his apartment. He opened the bedroom door and shoved Pearl in. She heard the lock click behind him, heard his low-throated giggle. She peered into the gloom. Esther, I brought another one. Esther? Who's she? And then Pearl saw the coffin in the gloom, the old coffin with the lid squeaking open, the pallid white figure rising from it, bits of earth dropping from its flowing black cape, the razor-sharp snake-like fangs, the oozing spittle. My God, what is it, Howie? What is it? This is my wife, Pearl. She's a vampire. Howard pushed Pearl towards the frothing, craving, hideous creature. I told you I wanted you for my wife. Oh, no. Oh, Lord. So, another fun one. And, you end with the commentary, from the storyteller. So poor Pearl finally found her last husband's sucker, or in this case, it was the husband's wife who was the sucker. Bloodsucker, that is. So I guess I'm still immature enough that those really appeal to me. Just the high drama of it and the grifter getting grifted, all of that really appeals to me. And, maybe, Pearl's been sucking the blood out of people for a while, metaphorically, so maybe it's only fair, right? So that's a little taste of Tales from the Crypt. And like I said, there's a huge variety of stories in these. I find them all a lot of fun. And even the kind of old-fashioned, overly bright kind of way that they're drawn is part of their charm. So if you haven't seen them, I hope you'll check them out. Happy Halloween.